Welcome to Rethinking Psychiatry, May 2020. We are so pleased and proud to have Karen Hixson with us, who's going to be talking about our collective mental health during the COVID-19 pandemic and rethinking psychiatry. I'm going to stop the screen share. There we go. And get my little cheat sheet up. Rethinking Psychiatry is an independent, all-volunteer educational activist group. Rachel, are you handling the spotlighting?
I can try.
Or you can why don't you spotlight me and then give me the hosting, and then when I'm done, I'll take over.
Sounds good.
Okay. So we're an independent, all-volunteer educational activist group. We are rethinking psychiatry, creating community, educating and activating for choices. Rethinking Psychiatry is part of a larger movement working to promote healing and choices in and beyond our mental health care system. And that's a nod and a thank you to Molly from Reimagining Recovery for this phrase of in and beyond. We love it. We're made up of people with lived experience, family members, professionals, and other allies. And we are not affiliated with and don't receive funding from or promote any religious organization, government entity, corporation, or drug company. And right now, there's a small band of us bringing you these monthly meetings. Rachel, who's been a very long time member, Cindy, I don't know if anybody else is here. I haven't been able to see the participant list, but Cindy, Kathy, V, David, Lacey, and me. I'm Grace. Hi, everybody. And if you are new to Rethinking Psychiatry, I'd love it if you put in the chat how you found out. In fact, if everybody would take a moment and put in the chat how you found out about us. And if you're new to us, please take a moment right now even and go to rethinkingpsychiatry.org and sign up so you get notices of our monthly events if you're interested. It takes about 2 seconds. And we just want to acknowledge that there's a range of feelings about what's going on in the world and the pandemic in particular, and we don't know when we're going to meet in person again. And so we want to thank everybody for your flexibility in joining the remote group. None of us have very extensive experiences with this, so we're figuring it out as we go. And we are going to post the recording on our website and Facebook, and we are planning to meet again remotely for our June 3rd event, because they're always the first Wednesday of the month. And June 3rd will be the last one for this season. We take the summer off. And we are discussing some very exciting, trying to get somebody also very exciting for our last meeting. And we're hoping we can get Voice Hendricks, who is the one of the original people of Soteria House in the original California Soteria House, which was a non-medical model place for people who are experiencing altered state experiences outside of hospitals and pathologizing and all of that. So it would be super exciting if we could get him. And we want to open it up to you all to see if there are any announcements. So if anybody has an announcement, you can unmute yourself, say it, or you can let us know in the chat, and we will read it.
Yeah, this is Kevin. I have an announcement. About 6 weeks ago, I was able to get the Oregon Health Authority to sponsor, at least for 90 days, the seeding of a brand new website, an online wellness and support group directory called peergalaxy.com/calendar. So as of May 1st, that contract is now out with the vendor, and they are up and starting to populate that list. So everything under the sun, from Rethinking Psychiatry to AA to Hearing Voices Network to DDA to everything. If you go to that website, you'll see the calendar, which will probably swell and grow as the days go by. But we're very excited about that new beachhead in the digital world to sort of be a clearinghouse of connections for mental health consumers.
And Kevin, how do people put things on that post things onto the calendar?
If you go to Peer Galaxy, they have an information page at the front end of it that tells you how to connect with Laura Rose and to give your connection. And she was actually training folks, volunteers, of how to put their own group in. So if you just go to peergalaxy.com in the information part, Laura has a section on contacting her and helping, if you can't do it yourself or you don't know how to do it or don't want to, Laura Rose Massaris is the administrator of that project. So.
And there was a request in the chat to post that website on the chat, please.
Will do. Thank you.
And are there any other announcements? There's a lot of excitement going on about it in the chat.
Kevin's always up to something good.
Yeah, so true. I am going to take a moment then and welcome Karen Hixson, who should be before you. And Karen has been a mental health counselor in Portland, Oregon since 2002, and she's strongly focused on social justice and anti-oppression based perspectives. She also does supervision for early career counselors working in community mental health and private practice. And she's actually Dr. Karen because she has a PhD in counseling, and her dissertation is on understanding power in the therapeutic relationship, which is so important. So she's one of the co-founders of Empathy Riot, which is formerly Mental Health Providers Unite, and was originally a group of mental health providers who wanted to figure out how to activate after the last national election, but I think it's broadened now. And she is the 2018 recipient of the Leona Tyler Award from the Oregon Counseling Association for recognizing her for outstanding contributions to the profession and having an impact statewide for counseling. So thank you so much for being willing to come and talk and share and take it away.
Oh, Grace, thank you. Thank you all for having me. I know you've all been on a lot of Zoom meetings or webinars or counseling on Zoom, and I appreciate you showing up tonight. It means a lot that you'd be interested in talking about this. A content warning, we are going to talk about the challenges of the pandemic and aspects of radical mental health and grief and things that, might stir up feelings, but I'm sure that occurs at every single one of these meetings with Rethinking Psychiatry. I want to thank you, Grace and Rachel, for inviting me here and the other organizing members. I really appreciate your ongoing work with Rethinking Psychiatry, and I can always trust that meeting is happening on the first Wednesday of the month. And rain or shine, you always have someone awesome to talk. And I really appreciate you opening up space for the narrative about mental health and psychiatry. So we appreciate in Empathy Riot being fellow comrades with you all. So thank you. And a couple of my Empathy Riot colleagues are here tonight, Carissa and Leah. So thanks for coming. My plan tonight is just to share some opening remarks about COVID and collective mental health and sort of the impacts that I'm seeing. And of course, this is just my perspective from my view. And then I'm going to talk about a few principles that I think might be helpful to sort of guide or funnel our discussion about our collective mental health, and perhaps some things that can be helpful, but also spacious. And I'm going to talk just a little bit about radical mental health in general, in case that's a term folks haven't heard. And then a bit about harm reduction as a philosophy and practice to help us during this time. And I'm going to speak about medicinal slowness, which might be a new term. And it's a bit of writing that someone I know recently put out there. I think it could be helpful to us right now. And a bit about grief, and a bit about grief and ambiguous grief and loss. And so hoping that those three things will take us to some helpful places to sort of create a loose container to talk about our collective mental health. But honestly, as you know, being on the internet, social media, everyone has an opinion about how to deal with this time, or a hot take, or an interesting meme. And I'm not here to add to that burdensome sort of like, this is what you should do, because I'm offering, options similar to the way Rethinking Psychiatry does. And I want you to know there's no one right way to handle what's going on. And clearly much of our strain, I think, that we're feeling, even related to mental health, is related to the systemic failures of how this pandemic is being handled on the national, sometimes state, sometimes international level. And so we are going to talk about politics a little bit. Hopefully we won't get too bogged down in that. But the global pandemic has had deep impacts on all of us, but of course those impacts aren't equal, and they're fueled by longstanding inequity in all of our systems in the US. And by systems, I mean political systems, health systems, educational systems, judicial systems, state, local, national bureaucracies that are certainly making things hard right now for people who are struggling. Even the small businesses in Portland having trouble accessing needed resources, people struggling to pay their rent. But these disparities are really long-standing. They were here long before Trump even came. They were here long before the pandemic. But the context is bringing a lot of those inequities out and causing us different levels of strain emotionally. And this context I'm sharing isn't meant to bring us down. It's really just meant to acknowledge things as they are. And of course, if we can acknowledge things as they are, we can find creative ways to survive what's going on. And that is the hope. Some of us are feeling a lot of isolation, health anxiety, fear, worry, extreme financial stress, poor leadership at a lot of levels, and so much uncertainty about the future. And I felt like last week we were entering the second phase of the pandemic, where it started to get really bubbly. When are we gonna, have the ability to go back to some things? And all the protests that were happening started to get a little crunchy, it felt like last week. And we aren't able to do many of the things that we would normally do to take care of ourselves right now. They're just not accessible in the same way because of the stay-at-home orders. Telemental health with your counselor is different than being in the room with them. Many of you are counselors, so your work is different right now. Socializing on Zoom, very different. We would all be in a room right now together in a giant circle, I imagine, snacking, drinking beverages, looking in each other's eyes. It's really different. We're not able to see sick and dying family members, possibly in the hospital. And we're just fatigued by a lot of things. And this is week 8, if any of you were not tracking. So people are struggling with parenting while working from home. The inequities in our school system are sort of surfacing with regards to education and technology. And we're all worried about the future. And then there's the other side, that despite all of this, we have really creative communities who are responding to this pandemic and doing amazing things. And we're all doing our best to adapt to these challenging times, like Rethinking Psychiatry, adapting to have a Zoom meeting, even though it's not comfortable or it's hard, just trying to keep our connections going, keep our resilience up, keep our education flowing. And in some ways, people have had a reduction in social pressure that has been helpful for them. I've heard that in my practice and in my community. Some people have more time to donate, create, make space. And some people are appreciating the break from productivity culture and the grind that is sort of the 24/7 life some of us seem to have to live. And a lot of my clients are appreciating a break from toxic work environments. And they're going to have a hard time going back to work in the office. That may be true for some of you. And there's a lot of amazing things happening with regards to beautiful community connection and mutual aid efforts. It was pretty amazing to see mutual aid discussed in mainstream media, a week or two after the pandemic sort of set in. And so it's pretty amazing to see all those projects. And then all of my community members dropping cookies off, dropping porch deliveries, getting meds for people, getting groceries for people. A lot of that care is helping us all get through. And I think mutual care, care networks, communities of care are so important right now. So there's the other side of things too, where there's a lot of beautiful things happening and a lot of resilience that is sort of coming out. So speaking, like moving towards radical mental health for just a minute, I think it's a beautiful frame to think about the pandemic and our collective mental health. And to me, I'm just speaking from my own personal philosophy and experience. Radical mental health is a philosophy that's broad, a set of broad practices that is designed to hold multiple perspectives, offering people choices and options, and of course, bodily autonomy, and ensuring that people are in charge of contextualizing their own mental health experience, and that it's not just a professional that is pathologizing them or naming their experience. And while I work as a professional counselor, I consider myself as someone with some level of lived experience and do not consider the us versus them phenomenon. So I am my clients. I just happen to be in this position of having gone to school to support them in particular ways. But with radical mental health, we're free to make choices, more choices about diagnosis, medication, treatment, hopefully, and get treatment with respect, dignity, and that people who are providing the care, which is important to me, as Grace stated with my dissertation, the people providing the care are aware of their power that they have over clients, over folks that are in inpatient treatment programs, over folks that are, on the other side of that crisis line. Being aware of that power, I think, is so important, and aware of the power the systems we work in has on our clients and us. And I really like to say that and hope that radical mental health has encouraged us, things like Icarus Project, Portland Hearing Voices, Rethinking Psychiatry, Reimagining Recovery, all of those resources have allowed people to feel more peer support, which I think is incredibly important. And I'm glad to live to see the day that, peer support is actually a part of our professional practice. I don't always think that happens equitably, but I do feel very appreciative of it. And I also appreciate the overlap between radical mental health, anti-oppression practice, disability justice, and all those intersections that we dream someday will come together to build this new world that we're trying to create. And I think that the biggest part about radical mental health is it acknowledges that our mental health struggles aren't just individual. They're not just biological. They're not just in our brain. They're not just chemical imbalances, although of course that can be part of it, but they're related to the contextual factors of living in this society, in the social conditions under which we live, whether that's productivity, capitalism, or, people who are more considered more normal or more neurotypical or more valued in our society. So acknowledging all of that, that's just probably the tip of the iceberg about radical mental health perspectives. But I think that rethinking psychiatry kind of opens us up, and then thinking about radical mental health kind of opens us up. And then sort of we're on this plane where we can really discuss maybe some ways to, work with these struggles that we're feeling from the pandemic. Maybe now would be an awesome time to hear from you all what your specific, maybe one of your challenges you faced in the pandemic, and maybe one of the things that you've experienced that's been surprising or beautiful. Do you if someone wants to unmute and share anything, or share anything in the chat? I don't want to talk the whole time. Anyone want to share a challenge? Or, no hugs. Yeah, the lack of physical contact. My buddy was in the office today, and I saw them and I just wanted to hug them. And it's really hard. We rely on that kind of connection to sort of feel that connected humanity. Anyone else want to share anything before we move on?
Yeah, I've been grieving not being able to see my somatic experiencing practitioners in person because they do body work.
Yeah.
So doing sessions with them via Zoom is not at all the same. I really miss the physical contact and the body work,
Absolutely. I was just expressing a similar sentiment about massage. While I'm cramped in this computer all day looking at it this way, like missing out on body work is a huge part of my own self-care practice. So I grieve that along with you in my own way. It's really hard. And I feel like it's hard to not know when. Oh yes, having an incarcerated partner. Yeah, I think that's one of the tragedies of this pandemic is what's happening in the prison industrial complex. And it's so scary. So thank you for being with us tonight to get hopefully some support for that. Anything else before we move on?
I think the uncertainty has been really hard, and not having a deadline. Like I kept telling myself this was going to be blow over by the time of my nephew's birthday, which is in like 2 weeks, and now that's seeming like a fantasy. And so like wanting to have a deadline has been really having absolutely no idea what's going to happen or what's going to get worse or what's going to get better.
Totally. And yet we're here like living this Groundhog Day existence.
Exactly.
That's weird, combined with the not knowing.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that speaking to, I think it was point, we are radicalizing a lot of people right now with how this is being handled and how the economic inequality is being put forth. And I think that there's some really awesome things about that. So I want to dive in to harm reduction as a possible principle to support our collective mental health right now. So many of you probably have heard that term harm reduction, but it came out of the radical activists who did drug treatment decades ago, who were looking at ways to support people who were drug users in ensuring that they were literally reducing harm by getting the care they needed, clean needles, safe place to be, etc. But harm reduction, when it was introduced to me, it sort of blew up in my mind as sort of a philosophy of being able to live life through a harm reduction lens, which I think is a really important, maybe anti-capitalist, anti-productivity, anti-perfectionist lens that I appreciate. And the reality is how harm reduction can help is that there's no one right way to do this pandemic. For any one person. There's no one right way to respond. You got memes, you got hot takes, you've got people saying this is what you should do, that is what you should do. And some of those things are incredibly helpful, especially depending on the day that you see them. It might be exactly what you need. And on another day, you might see something that says, rest, and you haven't rested at all. And you feel bad about that. So harm reduction can help us meet ourselves where we're at. And help us not blame ourselves or each other for how we're coping. And I think that's incredibly important because it's not useful to sort of say, you're not doing it good enough. As a counselor, I hear people every day say they're not good enough, they're self-critical, they feel awful about themselves, and there's really nothing beneficial about putting more pressure on people to get it right and to do it right. So I think what we could do is we can make adjustments to whatever we need when the energy is available to us. And some days, anti-self-care is self-care, and anti-self-care is sort of harm reduction. So if you find yourself using more substances or smoking more or, checking out more or extra Netflix time, you're going to feel maybe a little bit judgmental, but harm reduction allows you to think about, okay, so what do I need now? What do I need today? How does what I need tomorrow change from what I need today? And can I make those adjustments? And can I meet myself where I'm at every day, every week, each moment, and not feel rigid about what I should do and what I should be doing, and feeling guilty that I'm not exercising enough, or I'm not eating enough healthy food, or I'm not calling my community enough, and just trying to think about, well, what is important to me? If it is important to me to stay more connected to people, I can prioritize that, and I can think about that for the next day. Client texted me today and said they weren't doing so well at holding to some of their own care. And I said, tomorrow is another day. Every day you get to restart your practice for caring for yourselves and caring for your community. So just some questions for you. I'll read them really slowly so you can kind of marinate in them. And if you want to close your eyes, you can do that too. What do I need right now? How is that different from yesterday or last week? How does caring for myself help? And how does not doing it well enough make me feel like a failure? How does putting down social media today feel good and the next week feel isolating? How does pushing myself to help others help me and at other times feel harmful? So in general, the way that I think about how harm reduction can help our collective mental health is that rules aren't the path with harm reduction. And like Leah's saying, I have to restart every day. Yes, many of us do have to restart every day and say, okay, what do I need today? So it's about being flexible. It's about knowing some things that help, and also not being perfect, not being consistent, and not being regimented, and doing our best to survive when we're experiencing very difficult circumstances. And sometimes that survival is by any means necessary. And of course, not pathologizing or judging or criticizing ourselves for the ways that we're coping. I think that's really important right now. It can get real judgy out there on the internet. Do y'all notice that? Yeah. I'm curious for you all what harm reduction brings up for you. If anyone wants to share either just a general impression of how that might help you, or maybe what are some places you need to be flexible in addressing your daily well-being? Anything that you notice?
I find rules really comforting.
Mm-hmm.
I like my decisions to be pre-made whenever possible.
Mm-hmm.
It frees up my, it frees up the rest of my energy if I already know ahead of time. And so not knowing whether I'm going to feel good about going out in the world is really hard.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, knowing kind of reduces the mental load a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anyone else want to share? What do you do that works sometimes and then doesn't at others? Are there any things that jump out at you?
One thing I found so kind of helpful, this is kind of a silly thing I just found online, but it actually has turned out to be helpful. There was something somebody posted about, it was like, look up the song that was #1 on your 12th birthday, and that's your quarantine theme song. So I looked up mine, and it was Step by Step by the New Kids on the Block, who were a boy band in the late 80s and early 90s who were really popular when I was in middle school, but I couldn't stand them. I thought they were really annoying. But ironically, that's actually been really helpful. I keep telling my Stephen that was just like a silly thing. Step by step has turned out to be a good mantra.
You didn't think so when you were a kid. They were ever going to be cool enough for you.
Exactly.
And now step by step, good theme song. Yeah.
Exactly.
Totally. Music is actually something that helps me sometimes and doesn't help me at others. It really depends on my mood or how tired I am of what I'm listening to. But I noticed this morning, put on the music when I was in the bathroom after I listened to a little bit of Democracy Now! And it was really helpful to listen to some music. Anyone else? Things that help sometimes, but not always? Things that you're sometimes surprised don't help?
Well, when you were talking about harm reduction from the other place, about like I live with people in their 80s, and I try to be really, really mindful of all the restrictions, and then I find myself touching something, and then, I can all of the little tiny things, and just thinking like, this doesn't mean I should just, throw it all away, but just trying to be gentle, and like sometimes making choices that is like, well, this isn't exactly following it to the rule, but I'm going to do this right now, and I'm going to pick up again.
Do your best, right?
Well, actually, sometimes not. Like giving myself permission not to do it my best.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to make like an informed choice, but sometimes just feeling like, well, whatever thing happened, and then pick it back up.
Yeah. Some of you prefer probably structure, but is there anyone who feels like the idea of meeting yourself where you're at is kind of freeing? Does anyone feel like, oh, that gives me some room to breathe? And has anyone felt pressured by some of the how to improve your mental health during COVID conversations?
Maybe I say something. Let's say okay, how about this one? I sometimes feels like too much prepared for disaster. Like, Cascadia subduction zone, and then kind of like, wow, am I a little too paranoid or something? Then COVID boom happened. Then actually my coworker died, and then I start camping at the backyard. Then I didn't have to prepare much, just go back and go tent, and that was it. So like yeah, like kind of like that. So it's kind of also some of friends are a little bit, how do I say, reality a little bit chaotic one way, but now world is chaotic. So like, oh, just I'm familiar, I'm happy. I know this world kind of. I don't know. That's my yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's complicated. I just want to like acknowledge the conversation in the chat. One of the challenges of doing Zoom is so many ways of communicating, but was mentioning the worry about the breakdown of society and violence that could come from that, and was talking on Kebu this morning about that, the possible concerns we have about social unrest or a doubling down of catastrophe, like Jiro is saying, like what if something else happens? And I think that is very close to the surface for some of us right now regarding where's this going? Because there's like a pressure cooker kind of feeling about the last several years. So thanks for speaking to that, and Rachel, appreciate it. Yeah, so harm reduction is there for us. Meet ourselves where we're at. Sometimes care is anti-self-care. Sometimes we can do a good job at caring for ourselves and others, and sometimes we cannot. And every day we get an opportunity to start over. At some point tonight, we might break out into some small groups so that y'all can talk about these things in a little bit more detail with each other. Yeah, let me talk about medicinal slowness. Grace, you seem intrigued. Yeah, racists and misogynists are capitalizing on this time for sure. Absolutely. And I think that the political elements of what we're experiencing right now and the economic ones are the most stressful for me. Of course, I feel health anxiety. I feel worry for people getting sick, but the layers are really intense. So medicinal slowness. So someone I know and cherish recently wrote something about this concept of medicinal slowness. And this medicinal slowness was required for them when they were working to recover from a year-long mental health crisis. We're talking a year-long in and out of inpatient treatment and outpatient and intensive outpatient. And I'm just going to read a couple quick paragraphs from their writing on medicinal slowness. It's just a little taste, because I think that it'll be something that they develop a bit more. Slow was my medicine. Slow was my way through it. Slow required small dreams, a good morning, a moment of peace with the books, a nighttime walk. Slow needed someone to wait while I screamed. And most of the time, slowness required a ghost life. But the woman from outpatient was right. In time, I did find bright colors and joy and my own realness again. Amidst the demands of efficiency and haste in pandemic, I remember that life cannot always be sped up. Slow was not optional or temporary for me. It wasn't a silver lining or a blessing after a catastrophe. It was just the only way forward. It was the open door. And this is by Sage Schick. Put that down there so you know it's the author. So when this person said that word to me, my ears like perked up, because I am fast moving, like taking care of business. And I think I could use a little more medicinal slowness myself. So I just appreciated that idea of medicinal slowness and wanted to share that with you. And I'm wondering if slowing down has been a balm to any of you, or if it could be a balm to your mental health, and how it's impacted your mental well-being to be forced to slow down. I just feel very curious about how you're experiencing your own version of medicinal slowness. Any thought? I appreciate what you said, Kevin, about being protective of your joy and desire to play. I think that I just spoke with a client who was expressing a deep sense of guilt and shame that they're doing okay. And I think it's important to do what you need to do to shield yourself from whatever it is you don't need to come in. And that goes for the same for anything I'm saying right now. Take what's useful, leave what is not. It's all complicated. Any thoughts about slowness or how slowness is impacting you?
I'd like to hope that as a society, we might learn to appreciate slowness and simplicity and less consumptive ways. That's, hypothetically could be teaching people some of that, or showing them that, well, maybe they don't need to run around so fast or buy so much stuff.
Yep, run around so fast and buy so much stuff. And I mean, I have very little desire to do any kind of retail shopping right now. I don't know about you all, but this time of slowing down really does show you what is possible with regards to reducing consumption, I think, which is a huge piece. And then we have our sort of political folks in the world pushing us to consume, right? Y'all were around after 9/11. First thing George Bush said was go shopping. That's happening right now. Open up the economy, because 70% of our gross domestic product comes from consumption in one way, shape, or form, not just consumer, but other ways. So yeah, I want to hope for all the good things about this time.
Another kind of slowness that occurs to me, slowness to reach conclusions or decisions about things. For example, what is going on? What is this virus precisely? How can it be treated? Where did it start? Whatnot. I mean, Peter Breggin, for example, has been posting positive things about chloroquine. Now, listening to, say, Tom Hartman or the left, seems to have its mind made up at lockstep that this is a terrible drug or whatever. Well, I don't know if it is or not, but there are questions, and one need not jump too quickly to fall in line with whichever side of a two-party or a two-left, right-wing role that one perceives one to be in. I think it's entirely possible that there are answers that don't fall along those lines, and that people are habitually or politically driving us to reach decisions along those lines fast, and pick your side. This is what everybody on the left is saying. This is what everybody on the right is saying. Well, I don't know the answer to this or fit that, or that the truth falls that simply. I don't believe it does.
It's complicated. And all of the things that are happening right now, the timeline is pushing some of that. Let's get it figured out quick, and it's not quick and it's not easy, and we just don't know a lot of things. And I think we want that comfort of being this is good and this is bad. We like that binary thinking, especially when we're struggling and when we're suffering or when we're uncertain. And I think opening up space, or not even needing to have a thought about some things that you see out there, just letting some things just flow. I really want to acknowledge this concept of constructive apathy, this conversation that's happening in the chat. I love that idea, and I've never heard that word. And constructive apathy, not caring more than what I can influence. Grace and I were talking about that when we met up to talk about this meeting on Sunday, and maybe we'll loop back to that concept of constructive apathy a little bit later. But I love it. I love all the things y'all are sharing. Learning new words together, new things. Let's see. Any other thoughts before I move on?
Yeah, I have one about the call to reopen society.
Yeah, what are you feeling about that?
Well, there's no change. We don't have a vaccine. We don't have any more medicines that work. There's no basis for reopening.
Yeah.
It's just that the moneymakers want to make money. So we're going to reopen it, and that's going to kill more of us.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think, and I don't see the governor is considering it and so on. I don't remember I didn't find out what she said, but I think there needs to be a strong pushback from the rest of us that our lives are what matter.
Yeah.
The economy is just here to serve us. We're not here to serve the economy.
Woo! Let's quote you on that last thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty obvious, right?
Oh, of course. I mean, I don't think you'll find any argument from many of the folks here on that.
Yeah, but how would we get our politicians to start advocating that? I guess, I don't know, put them on the spot somehow. I don't know.
Oh, I don't think that I certainly have the answer. If anyone else does, please chime in. I think that it's an important question, and I think it's caused me a lot of anxiety in the last 10 days. I think that was you speaking. It's caused me a lot of anxiety. Is that right? Yeah. Okay.
Well, I'm planning on staying home.
Yeah, and I think that for me, the thing that sparked my anxiety about it was I saw a Facebook conversation of other fellow mental health practitioners discussing when they're going to start seeing clients face to face. And I was just like panicking, thinking about that, because
there's no basis for it.
What's that?
There's no medical health basis.
No.
I mean, if now is not the time, later is not going to be the time either if we're not protected anymore. That's crazy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's super challenging. And I think that even just coming to a meeting like this tonight gives you a little bit more, hopefully, spaciousness to think about your own needs right now. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's going to be incredibly important in the weeks to come. What are your needs? What are your values that are guiding you? You know, and your values of, you know, safety and care for yourself and the lives of others are guiding you in that situation, and not sort of, you know, capitalism. The truth is they could take care of the economy if they wanted to. It appears that they do not. And, you know, as a small business owner who was attempting to get support recently, I mean, it's very clear who got that support, right? From the CARES Act and some of the other stimulus packages. So, I mean, that piece, there's the health piece, the mental health piece, the economic piece, and the political piece. And they're all so interconnected and complicated and challenging. And we can't sacrifice one for the other. I think holding the complexity of what's happening is incredibly important, and trying to make good decisions for ourselves and others. But yeah, this is tough. This is a hot mess, as I keep saying, or a dumpster fire, which has been much overused concept in the last few years. But seems like the dumpster fires keep happening.
You mentioned about taking care of ourselves, but I think taking care of our community.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that includes taking care of us, and I don't see a separation there. So I don't think we need to focus too much on just ourselves, but focus on our identity as a people or as a community. I think.
Yeah, I mean, we have to consider the collective and the individual, and our society has focused very much significantly, heavily handed on the individual and sort of self-contained individualism, and thinking more about community care and care of communities and mutual aid is extremely important. And there isn't enough of a safety net for most of us. And I think that these comments sort of lead to the next topic I want to talk about, which is grief and loss and grieving. Right after the pandemic kind of started, I was in a peer consult group with a couple of my beloved colleagues, and we were having this conversation, and it sort of went something like, what do we even have to offer people in this time as mental health practitioners? You know, what the hell do we have to offer? I mean, we're going through it with them. A lot of our tools are, it's hard to translate some of the tools, not all of them, but it was sort of born out of our own sort of sense of helplessness about like, how do we support ourselves and our clients in this time? And that was probably 6.5 weeks ago that conversation occurred. And it was one of the first times someone said to me that I think that they said like grief and like the framework of grief and grieving could be a helpful framework for this time. And that was helpful to me at that moment. And I've been thinking a lot about losses, so many losses, small, that we've all had in this just short 8 weeks. And those include very big things, including people, and very small things, things that were alive, things that were emerging, things that were plans, things that, financial progress that we were making, from our class background, et cetera. Professional goals stalled. I know that I'm doing a training in the next couple of weeks, and that training is happening at this time because I was supposed to be working in Spain in April. So I'd moved this training, and now the training itself is a reminder of this loss of being able to do a project that I was, so excited about, and just loss of stability, loss of businesses. The list is starting of like the restaurants that are going to close in our community. They're sort of our beloved connecting spots. And just, certain ground that was gained that was lost. And I think that ambiguous loss is something that can help us right now, because there are losses. These are losses that are harder to mark with closure or ritual, or they're harder for other people to see because they're not very marked. or, you know, some of the loss of life right now is so, has that ambiguity of it too, because we cannot come together to grieve in the same way that we would have to honor some of the things that are happening, some of the losses of life. And so these are ambiguous loss, or things that are just hard to pinpoint. They're hard for other people to understand we have grief about, and they're hard to mark with ritual. And there are losses sometimes that have no cultural acknowledgement in our society. So I think grieving, and I think Joanna Macy has set the tone for us to sort of look at some grieving regarding the ecology of the world and what's going on with the natural world regarding climate change. So grieving an ambiguous loss and just having ritual to grieve. I've probably been needing to grieve for some years. Yeah, community grieving. I tend to trend towards frustration, anger, action, productivity. And so those other softer grief, tender, tearful feelings are a little bit harder for me to get to sometimes. But community grieving and just acknowledging what's happening right now. I mean, this is unprecedented, what's happening right now. It's hard to grasp because it's so unprecedented. So yeah. What are your thoughts about grief or grieving? Like, what are you all grieving or pre-grieving even? Like, I'm hearing some things in the chats about things that people are pre-grieving or fearful of.
Yeah, this is, I've been spending a lot of time walking solo in dusk in the forest, and just, I never quite know exactly how to achieve it, but sobbing and weeping. And most of it has to do with some of my internal the way that I behave to myself. And I was thinking the other day after I came out of the forest and was trying to put a good face on to be back in the empty city so no one would see me crying, was I spent 3 hours in the forest crying because because of the amount of self-contempt and violent self-talk I have for myself. And I had a question of shouldn't I be worrying about the state of the world or something else here? Here I am. And I had an initial reflex about that of well, I don't know. But I come from a sense as I've never thought in that American or Western or the culture that we set up benefits the most people anyway. I've always been looking for something that may help us change our rudder or change our compass, like a dangerous opportunity, i.e. a crisis. My goal is that the United States collapses, the army takes over, we have a constitutional convention, and then Cascadia becomes a bioregion, and then we just go from there.
I think some other people have that fantasy as well. Yeah.
I guess for me, I'm having to just sit with my own self and not having lots of other people I'm helping all the time, because I have no degree, but I'm an activist and I worked a lot with the houseless community. And I worked all the way till October 30th last year in an outdoor camp. And I had to abandon that for self-care because it was so different up here in Alaska. There is nothing to do if you're homeless. No paper to sell, no cans to recycle.
Right.
You have a job and then you become homeless and you struggle to keep your job up here. And so there's a lot of criminality going on, with people surviving, and the options are a lot of other people who have power, the living houses, going out there doing the drug dealing, forcing people into bike repair, theft. And it's also the intensity of the generational trauma up here. 40% of the folks up here, Native American, who are on the streets in our city. And it was overwhelming because I have my own generational trauma for being European, which goes back further than what's happening in the indigenous community. Indigenous community, I think a lot of people look at how messed up they are, but I go, well, but wait a minute, because every time I ran into people out there, they all had cousins. They're a whole idea of an extended family is 20 people, and they're maybe 3 or 4 or 5 other cousins that are on the streets with them. And it's a whole different idea about resilience and what is community and what actually works. So going into the idea of fantasy, I work with Native Movement up here in Alaska, and they're working with Poor People's Campaign and working with houseless. And I live in this really big contradiction space right now because one of the people who's heading up the activism I'm doing it's also renting to people. And one of the people who's renting has manic episodes and blew all her rent and is being kicked out. And it's like such a freaking confusion for me. And I'm like doing my best to take care of myself and also do security and care for the other person. And it's like I had to lock my door and say, fuck everybody. And that was my self-care.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow, I'm like really dealing with some contradictions and dealing with myself, not being able to help other people.
Yeah.
And that's a big, huge change for me, but it's also really real. I'm having an opportunity to be on land and be planted as a person and be in a space. And I haven't had that in 2010. I haven't really had a place that I felt I'm going to claim as my own, and I'm in charge of this place. It's so different. And I'm really looking to figure out how I can help with the turning everything upside down, because everybody wants to do economics and politics, and that's such a screwed up system. It's not organic. It not does that whole self-organizing life form process. And I'm like really struggling with my own sense of survival and fear, and challenging with also life-giving properties that are actually going to make a difference. It's a whole big, huge paradigm shift that I'm involved in. That's a different level for me. It's like I'm on the ground, and that's so different. That way, I can talk theory and I can move around as long as I'm not responsible for a place. Now I'm responsible for a place, and it's really a whole big challenge for me. How do I be responsible here and be organic and be self-organizing and help organize people around healing justice, which is healing to me. All this stuff about politics used to go back using our power to help heal each other. So that was kind of like, I'm still working on this. It's like, I'm like telling everybody, I'm not together. And then it's like,
that's okay.
And then I hope that I come together and know how to rise out of this with the ground underneath me. And I'd rise with this whole idea of bearing fruit, because I feel like that's the place about fruit, sharing and creating trust and creating relationships. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Thank you for sharing all of that. And thanks for being here from Alaska. I think that's one of the cool things about the more online environments that are being created right now. Thanks for coming. Those of you that need to go. I think it's so important that people have options to join into conversations and not be isolated. So it's lovely to see some of you from other places, from BC and Alaska. And contradictions, survival, fear. There's a lot of complicated layers to all of this right now, and no simple answers. So I came here tonight not to give any really simple answers, and I hope that it's helpful that I don't believe that there is a simple answer. Anyone else have any thoughts about ambiguous loss or grieving, or how it could be liberating for us to grieve right now? Any other things you're thinking about? If you're out there thinking a thought and you're like, should I say it? Should I not? You can do it. It's always hard to talk in a group. It can be hard. I wonder if now would be a wonderful time to break out into small groups. There's 19 of us here. So, and to just connect to anything that is alive for you right now from our conversation, something you didn't share, something you're needing to be witnessed in connection to other community. I'm not sure if I can do the breakout. So
let me know if you want me to try and do it.
Yeah, I do think we need more debates. I've often fantasized about putting on local debate events where on an issue where you have people from quite different perspectives. But I wouldn't necessarily want it to be the, classic rattle trap debates where people are spitting out stuff too fast, but some kind of dialogue instead of just one side of an issue.
Yeah. Well, we in our small group, we got political with everything. Not a surprise maybe with the crew we had, but I want to say, like, sometimes when I watch sitcoms and I see high school debate club, I feel jealous of it. Like, I would love to have more space for healthy conversation, dialogue. So, thank you, the folks I was with. What came out of your small group combos that you want to share? Welcome back, whoever.
Interesting sound.
I'm going to have to go. Shoot, sorry.
Thank you for coming, Terry.
All right, so folks, I just muted everybody except apparently me, I guess because I'm the host, but you all could unmute yourself when you're ready to talk.
Yeah, just going back to what came out of your small groups, what was engaging, what was dynamic, what was present for all of you. Anybody want to share?
Sure. I kind of set the focus, I suppose, by saying that it concerned me very much that these large social media sites have, over the last several years, they say, oh, we've hired or whatever, we're now working with such and such fact-checking group, and whatever they say, we'll follow and kick people off our site if they say things that are, for example, not true about vaccines or the virus. They're booting perspectives off of social media. For example, there's a documentary about the WHO and corruption thereof, connections to pharmaceutical companies, and claims that they that in earlier, I think it was a swine flu thing in 2008, that they suddenly changed their criteria. The WHO suddenly changed their criteria for a pandemic just in time to make it a pandemic, so that they had to buy, they were then legally obliged to purchase massive amounts of some vaccine or something that was, I've forgotten the fine details. In fact, I haven't watched the whole documentary. I watched parts of it. But it's not so much whether I think the documentary is accurate or not. The point is, how can I know whether it's accurate or not? I haven't even watched it, and neither have you. So how can somebody else decide for you whether it's worth watching? But that is what is going on. It's very bothersome. It's been booted off YouTube and Vimeo, and that's just among many examples, I think. I think it's down. Pharma has their, among other entities, Pharma is pressing. So anyway.
That's why they call it Big Pharma.
Yeah, it's bigger than we think, maybe.
Yeah, some of you may have. Go ahead.
I knew it was really big, but I didn't know that maybe they have the power to shape the whole media globally. I think they are doing that. They apparently have more lobbyists in DC than anybody. And so that is just an example of, they're very powerful, put it that way.
Yeah. So other kinds of conversations that occurred in your small group, anything anybody wants to share that came out of that?
I brought up in my group, because I happen to be with two people in the helping professions. So I asked them if they were familiar with such concepts as somatics and polyvagal theory, and they were to a certain extent. So I really got to enjoy sharing resources with them on these subjects, because these are a huge paradigm shift in these types of fields. And I personally believe that we need to, get the word out as much as possible about these two things, polyvagal theory and somatics, specifically somatic experiencing, because we really need this paradigm shift in the helping professions. And so, yeah, that was fun.
Sounds like it was a mini chat within a chat. That's awesome. Anyone else want to share? Rachel, is that you?
I'm not sure what happened. Originally, I was in the group with you, Karen, and a few other people, and then I just kind of mysteriously, I didn't decide to.
Sorry, I had the power. I was trying
great.
Okay. So that was
sorry about
confusing. We talked about a lot of different things, but the whole idea of the ambiguous loss and grief was a big thing, and how it's made grieving so much more difficult. I shared that my aunt had passed away shortly before this had all happened, and it would have been a million times. The situation was difficult, but it would have been a million times more difficult if it had happened 3 weeks or a month later. So
you did get to engage in your processes of grieving, Rachel.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. I have one more thing to close us up. If anyone does not have anything else they want to share about their small group, anything else?
Yeah, I just wanted to share that it's so good to see so many faces here. I just love that. And that's what our small group was about, was just the power of connecting with people that have a similar passion for breaking apart the systems that monopolize and oppress us. So I'm glad to be here tonight. Thanks for doing this, Karen. And thanks, as always, to Rethinking. The snacks are amazing, but I haven't been able to figure out where the bathroom is. Thanks, you guys.
Thanks for sharing, Teresa. I love the way you said all of that, the power of connecting to break down some of these oppressive systems. I love that. Well, I just have one more thing, and it was...
I wanted to ask this, repeat what she said about these two approaches, somatic something and something, and polylegal theory.
Yeah, it's going to be in the chat.
Okay, all right.
There you go.
And there's also another
So you'll
comment
email
in the
that
chat.
out.
Oh, are you on phone?
It's in the chat. You can see it right now if you want to grab it. Can you see the chat? Is it you that's talking?
I'm not talking.
Oh, who was talking? Who was asking about those two comments?
I think that was...
Okay, cool. Yeah, they're in the chat. Polyvagal theory and somatic experiencing.
And the chat's gonna disappear. So
catch it now.
Take a note.
Take a note. Write it down.
And there's another piece.
Yeah, if you're phone, you cannot save. But if you're not phone, like computer or laptop, then you can see the 3 dots in the chat, and you can save chat.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Welcome.
A Zoom expert is among us.
I'm tech support.
Awesome. Someone is saying, we also talked a little bit about the struggle between increased amount of need for support, mental health support specifically due to COVID, and how the situation makes it so much harder for folks to find support because telehealth requires the internet, laptop, phone, private, quiet space. Yeah, all those, so many barriers right now to getting the care and support people need, for sure. And some people don't want to do telehealth anything, telemedicine anything. So that is a challenge for sure. Yeah. And people aren't in private spaces. You know, I've seen people's partners and kids, and I mean, the pets are fun to see for sure. Well, one more thing. I wanted to end with a little quote and perhaps an activity you can take with you. One of the things that I did the last couple weeks was write down a list of things that I did not want to go back to normal when things go back to normal. And when I was meeting with Rachel and Grace, we talked about the need to be aware that, you know, that question of not wanting things to go back to normal also can have like a macro level kind of hopelessness to it. We're talking a lot about the macro level system today, but there are some things that are happening in our personal lives or the way that we're managing our lives in this pandemic. So I'm going to read a quote from Sonia Renee Taylor. Some of you might have seen it floating out on the internet. "We will not go back to normal. Normal never was. Our pre-corona existence was never normal other than we normalized greed, inequity, exhaustion, depletion, extraction, disconnection, confusion, rage, hoarding, hate, and lack. We should not long to return, my friends. We are being given the opportunity to stitch a new garment, one that fits all of humanity and nature." So that quote has a sort of offering in it that connects to what are the things that we don't want to go back to normal, that we have some control over, that are helpful to our well-being and the collective web. One of the things that I've appreciated a lot in this time is checking in with more people that typically like come off my radar. You know, being able to reach out intentionally to people that maybe I would only talk to once every year or two, but the intentionality of checking in on them right now feels really good and like something I don't want to lose. I also found myself just cooking and eating more meals at home, and I love that. I mean, the dishes are kind of annoying, but I've been loving, you know, just eating at home. So yeah, what about for you all? I mean, that's a question you can take with you to ponder, like making a list of things that you don't want to go back to normal, whether that's about being busy or productive or not caring for yourself or others. But yeah, does anyone have some things that they are really appreciating right now that they don't want to lose? in the post-pandemic time, whenever that is?
The mutual aid groups organized through social media and other means. Those are crucial, and I have some chronically ill friends that have been needing that sort of thing for 10 years now, and now that it's finally happening, they're like crying with joy. I'm getting help now during this pandemic that I haven't been able to get for 10 years.
Yeah.
And also this decentralization of the food systems. You know, I have a background in the food industry, and I heard, you know, the stories on social media of this, I think it was in Maine, a milk producer who was told to dump his milk, but instead he decided to bottle it and sell it directly to people.
Yeah, that happened in Pennsylvania, my home state too. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, yes, I was cheering so hard for that, and we need more of that. Absolutely, because the centralization of the food system, you know, has completely messed things up, and it makes it impossible to gain access to food during this time now when we need it most. So yeah, that.
Yeah, cut out the middleman, right? Cut out.
Yeah, exactly. I've been looking into buying cow shares here, you know, like seriously.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's another inspiring piece of food is I've never seen so many people plant gardens in Portland. I mean, Portland's a pretty garden-centered city, but even people that don't like gardening, I don't love it, but everyone is planting food, which is amazing. So, yeah.
I wish I could, but I live on a 20-story high-rise with a little concrete balcony crammed full of stuff, you know.
But you have plans for that cow. You're going to get that cow somehow.
Yeah, my half a cow.
Anything else, people? So Leah said going slow, feeling okay to go slower.
I have things.
Go ahead.
For me, probably the biggest is I think lots of young people and whatever think about 150 years, 170 years, human will be extinct. But that's kind of because of like what we did, and air is clean and CO2 went down, and lots of people freed from jail. So these things, like there's a little bit of hope. Maybe we will be extinct within 100 years. That's what I saw. I kind of feels. And also one more thing I'm kind of deeply troubling is around China, because air becomes so clean, then, you know, people die by pollution. And now potentially pollution killed more people than COVID. So if we go back, then we will kill more. Then we really want to go back. It's kind of trouble thinking. Thank you very much.
I think part of changing that pollution piece of things is also wrapped up in our educational system and our employment system. And that's what I hope doesn't go back to being the same. I would love to see us offer a lot more virtual degrees, maybe even for high school or younger. I know there's homeschool and there's something to be said about socialization, but just where we can, cutting back on the cars that sit with their engines on at schools and businesses, it just makes me nuts.
What she said just reminded me of one other huge thing that is a sentiment I've seen among the disabled community, is that all these accessibility options that disabled people are now getting that they weren't able to get before because they were told it was impossible, quote unquote. And so a lot of the disabled people are saying, you know, we need to keep these accessible options available to us and not go back to the way things were, because we've clearly proven that it is possible. Yeah.
I've been appreciating that narrative being pointed out, you know, in the larger mainstream. It was always possible. Powers that be just didn't want to do it. Yeah. Anything else anyone wants to share? Any closing thoughts?
Maybe one more.
Go ahead.
Just right, as everybody knows, the historically underserved community, it's become very obvious that it's okay to these people die or not. That's really visible. I like that.
I have a question for you, Karen.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with polyvagal theory and somatics?
Yeah.
Yay, I'm super happy to hear about that.
Polyvagal theory is kind of definitely I would say, blown up in the Pacific Northwest. So we're right below you, so this whole zone. Someone was going to say something else.
Finally, host can stop the unconscious noise.
Anything else before we close her down?
I feel hopeful.
That's great. Do you want to say anything else about that?
I felt like when it first started happening, I feel like I was being given a break. And I think when things go back to normal, it's like, I'm not going back to normal. I've now been normal, and I've been living a whole lifestyle off the grid, and came back here, not had a job, but I did the work that I meant to do, which is activism work. And so I'm worried about money. And I'm going to continue with that relationship. And all of a sudden people are going to be giving money for me being involved in teaching, which is really exciting for me. So I feel like moving slow into this is a really good idea for me. But I'm also seeing everybody, I'm just feeling there's a lot more people looking for what I can give now. There's a lot more people looking for that. And I was like, okay, cool. I'm here. This is great.
Awesome. Well, I want to just appreciate all of you for coming, chatting about these things and talking to each other and sharing your experience. And I wish you all the best in caring for yourself and caring for your communities. And thanks for having me, Grace and Rachel, and anyone else, organizer who's here. It was lovely to hang out with you all, and hope to see some of you again.
Thank you so much, everyone, Karen and everyone.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It was great to meet a lot of you and see some familiar faces.
Yes.
Thank you.